Hey everyone, this is Mike, and in this video I wanted to talk about rankings in Final Fantasy XIV and how I don't really like the stance that Square Enix is taking. Now, if you don't know, or if you watched the previous live letter, Square Enix and third-party programs are not very big friends, and as you might know, if you've ever raided before, there is a program called Advanced Combat Tracker, aka ACT, and a website called FFXIV where you can basically track how well you're doing, and then you can upload it to FFXIV to basically see how well you rank up against other players. Now, there is no real way to do this yourself in-game, so people that play on PS4 don't have access to this. It's only for people on PC because it is a third-party program, and of course Square Enix does not like you using this. Of course, they also know that this is kind of a necessity when it comes down to raiding, because there needs to be some kind of way for you to gauge how well you're doing or how well your party is doing, so that you can improve and of course beat the raid. But they don't want to create a in-game application that can do this as well, because they don't want to create a toxic environment. Now, the reason why I have a problem with this, that there is no rankings for any of the combat gameplay in the game, I guess you could say, or combat PvE gameplay I should specify. And that is because in all of the other content, or for at least a big chunk of the other content, there are rankings, and they basically say that they don't want to make rankings for Savage and Extreme Primals and that kind of stuff, because they're afraid that it might turn people toxic. But why do you have rankings for all of the other content? And just look at PvP. Lords of Vermilion even has rankings, which I don't think like 90% or 95% of the community even plays at all. Like even crafting got rankings in the like Isgardian Restoration and stuff like that. So when you look at stuff, pretty much all of the more, well, I wouldn't say all of the casual content, because PvP and Heaven on High, Palace of the Dead and stuff like that, that's really not casual content. But even crafting is more competitive than raiding in this game, and that does kind of hurt, I guess you could say, because when it comes down to like running dungeons, doing extreme primals, 24-man savage raids, that kind of stuff, that is all stuff that gauges how well you are playing. Of course, like for example, how fast do you clear the dungeon, how much damage did you do in the savage raid, that kind of stuff. And I know that for a majority of the community this doesn't really matter at all. A lot of people just play this game to have fun and they don't care how well they are playing, but there's a bunch of people out there that do want to be better. Like, a big reason why I play games is because I want to be good at them. I don't like playing a game and being really bad at it. I just try to improve myself because that is something that I enjoy when I play games. So there not being anything to measure this in the game itself and having to turn to third-party programs is a little bit of a bummer, especially when there are rankings out there for all of the other content, quite literally almost. So it's a little bit unfortunate that it's not really there. Them implementing it for stuff that doesn't necessarily matter, like for example crafting, as I was saying before, is something that I'm not quite a fan of, because when it comes down to savage raiding and extreme primals, dungeons of course not so much because they don't really care that much, and 24-man's not so much either, but when it comes down to extreme primals and savage raids, I do really think that there should be some kind of a way to see how well you are doing, or how well your party is doing. And the reason for that is that you're fighting against an enrage. As soon as there is an enrage introduced, people should step up their gameplay. If you're playing with a black mage that does 1000 DPS, they should not be in that party when it comes down to being like fighting an extreme primal, or when it comes down to fighting a savage raid. Savage raids even more so, because extreme primals are usually very lenient when it comes down to their enrage, but when it comes down to savage raids, their enrage really is not, especially not when you're doing it on content. Of course, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks after the game's been out, or after the content's been out, you're of course going to start outgearing the content as well, and then having 1 or 2 people underperform is not that big of an issue. But when it comes down to doing it very early into the tier, let's say first week, second week, third week or something like that, when there are not that many weapons around, when there's not that much gear around, then having people play better is very important. And it's very unfortunate that there's no real way in the game anywhere to gauge how well you're doing other than Stone Sky Sea. And Stone Sky Sea is not perfect either, because it's just a dummy. It doesn't introduce mechanics, and it doesn't also say how well you are playing. It just tells you, okay, you managed to beat a dummy with unknown HP, and you should be okay when you go into the raid that was designed around that dummy. or like the dummy's HP was designed around the raid's HP, something like that. So it doesn't even teach you if you played well, yes or no. And then when you look at, for example, ACT, that's a really good way to see whether or not you are doing well, because it compares you against the other people as well. Whenever I do any kind of extreme trial or savage, I upload the logs just to see my own self-improvement. I want to know how well I am doing and if I am playing correct, yes or no. If I upload the log and I see, oh, you got 95 percentile, I'm like, okay, I'm doing something right. But then if I upload it and I get something like a 40 percentile, I'm like, okay, I'm probably doing something wrong here. And even then, there's a lot of other resources out there that is made by players, like guides and POVs and stuff like that you can go and check out to improve. But the game itself does nothing to help you do this at all. You have to all try to find it out about yourself. And the only real way how you can find out whether or not this new rotation works better than the previous one is by stuff like using ACT, because you can compare the numbers. Going into Stone Sky Sea and comparing one rotation against another is literally impossible, because there is a time limit of just 3 minutes, and 3 minutes is not enough for most jobs to like practice a full-blown rotation that you do on a boss, because a lot of jobs have like a 6-minute rotation. Just look at Dark Knight, for example. Technically Dark Knight is 6 minutes, I believe, and there's a few others as well. So it's really annoying that there is no real way for us to see how we can improve in the game either, and the game not helping us at all. Like, for example, say, most people know this, but normally most jobs, if you don't have an attack speed buff like some of the melees, you can double weave, aka using 2 off GCDs per GCD. Now, say for example you go into Stone Sky Sea and you triple weave, or you do 4 weaves or something like that before you hit that next GCD. Maybe there should be a pop-up at the end of Stone Sky Sea of being like, oh look, you did a quad weave here, you shouldn't really be doing this kind of stuff. Something like that. It's all very simple stuff. Like, for example, when you're playing warrior and you let your damage buff drop off, like your Storm's Eye, they can maybe make a pop-up like, oh look, here you dropped your Storm's Eye, you should try to apply this at all times before it drops off. Very simple stuff like that. I think something like that will already help the player base quite a bit. And then of course having an actual parser in the game is a very big help when it comes to people improving themselves. When I first started raiding, I was absolute trash, and I didn't know ACT existed until I tried out for the static. And then when I tried out for them, they said, Ilya, look, you're not really playing that well, I'm going to give you some resources, a guide, a POV, and ACT, and practice on a dummy and then come back next week. And I practiced a little bit, and I went from being an absolute trash machinist to being a slightly above average machinist. And that is all because I had the numbers available to me. If I didn't have the numbers, I also didn't know if I was improving, other than just me feeling better about how I'm playing the job. But just feeling is not enough to actual knowing whether or not you are doing better. And that is why I would like to see something change in this regard. I know Square Enix probably is not going to be doing this, but it is something that I can hope about. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, kind of share my frustration about the fact that there's so many rankings in the game for content like crafting that literally doesn't matter, and that for the content that really does matter, like Savage Race and stuff like that, that they don't have an official ranking, only the one that is made by the players themselves via ACT and via FFlog. So that's kind of going to be it for me. I hope you enjoyed it, some food for thought, and I'll see you in the next one.